have been given the role of chairing this session. A large group of panelists who have made some excellent presentations about what is needed in diagnostics, ways in which we can make diagnostics more accessible, and how diagnostics can accompany therapeutics and even vaccine initiatives. I will not ask any question for now because of the time available, and we'll open it to the audience for anybody with a question to any of the panelists, starting from the one in front here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I must admit that I've enjoyed the entire period of this session's presentation on diagnostics. My name is Samuel Jesse from Ghana, as I said earlier on. But my first question would really go to Jim.
Okay.
Jim, I really enjoyed your presentation, looking at, the flow cytometer for the CD4s. I was just kind of thinking that because most of your equipment were bench-based, and some of them were also small, looking at the African or the sub-Saharan African context, where most of these NTDs are likely to concentrate, you realize that in most parts of these West African countries, we do not really have a very stable power. I don't know whether your industry is thinking of probably bridging a battery-operated instrument vis-a-vis the grid connected. I don't know. Probably if you think in such a direction, I think it would be very helpful. And then also to Joseph, a very brief one. I realize that FIND do a lot of sponsorship for biodiagnostics, which I must say they are doing so well. I really want to know, if somebody had an innovative biodiagnostic technology, do your institution or FIND have a budget ceiling for an open source application? Thank you.
Well, I'll start. We address the fluctuations in Africa and electricity two ways. Initially, the instruments will all ship with an uninterrupted power supply that has a battery backup in it that can support the instrument for up to 2 hours. That's enough to run 20 samples easily. We are also developing a computer-like battery that will power the instrument up to 4 hours, so that if you decide to take the instrument out in the field, you could use those batteries. And both those, the UPS and the computer-type battery, will be available as an accessory.
So the open source application and budget ceilings, we would normally not start with the budget ceiling. We would look at how that application would be used in addressing the need that we are addressing. And then we'll take it from there. Yeah. Is a question on the right?
Hi there. Sterios Moskos from University of Westminster. The question I have is directed to FIND and the extent to which FIND is prepared to interact with academic groups, not necessarily looking at only open access models as previously stated, but early technologies which might have promise. To what extent are your financial models tying you in with larger companies?
That's a very important question. Our interaction with academics and also with industry is driven by what we have defined as the focus. Being not a very large NGO that is driven by funding from donors, we look at how far into discovering we can get into, and if we do that, what impact will it have in terms of competition with others who are better placed? So our model focuses on technologies or concepts that are close to proof of principle, and then we engage with academia, with industry. What I showed earlier on here with regards to sleeping sickness it was mainly driven by the academic sector. Industry got involved much later on. There's a question at the center.
Hello, my name is Tegwan Madalais. I'm a PhD student at LSHTM. My question's for Richard Anthony. I was very interested in your use of a host biomarker for an infectious disease. And at LSHTM, I've heard quite a lot about the LAM urine assay for TB. Would you consider using that alongside your host marker?
The LAM urine assay, at least in its current format, is only really giving useful performance in quite sick HIV-positive patients. Of course, the advantage of using a bacterium-derived marker is the specificity of the presence of the marker is good for the disease. And that's why we use the host marker for monitoring treatment response. We are not suggesting using these relatively non-specific host immunomarkers for diagnosing the disease. There is some tantalizing evidence from Norway, I think, that if you use a very sensitive method of detecting LAM, that it will be useful in larger groups of patients, but that's quite preliminary data. And there is some evidence that the LAM in urine is due to the presence of intact bacteria in patients with disseminated infection. So it may well be that LAM has a niche application. And to really answer your question, we haven't considered combining our biomarker with LAM.
Another question? You have the microphone.
Thank you. It's the power of the microphone. Can I ask our last speaker, in relation to dengue diagnostics, if you see the surveillance data, less than 2% of cases are really confirmed. So there's quite a lot of clinical reporting, but very few of them are really confirmed in surveillance laboratories. And then in the new emerging epidemics of chikungunya in Latin America, is exactly the same. Less than 2% of cases are confirmed. Don't you think that now is the time with your new consortium to combine chikungunya and dengue diagnostics?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And yes, of course, we are thinking about combining both viruses because the same area, the same vectors, and dengue is maybe more advanced in terms of epidemics than chikungunya. But in the future, we believe that a duplex assay combining dengue and chikungunya will be very, very useful. Yeah.
Probably allow 2 more questions. There are now 2 people holding mic, so I'll go with the one here.
Just a follow-up on that question. I agree that'd be highly valuable. The 2 are clinically confusing, chikungunya and dengue, often misdiagnosed one for the other. So yeah, that'd be a terrific addition, and add Zika virus to the list as well, since it also causes fevers and rashes, and there have been some reported cases now in South America of Zika virus as well. But then another question, back to a follow-up, Richard, in terms of specificity. I guess I was wondering, monitoring cytokine responses for drugs, of course, in over a 7-day period, I immediately think of dengue and IP10 spikes as does IL-6, spikes with dengue infection, and within 7 days that would be reduced. So mightn't still the other infectious diseases cause some specificity issues with your assay?
Yes, there will, of course. The way we are proposing to use it, we hope it will be able, and of course we are claiming that we are detecting patients who are on appropriate therapy. We're not detecting drug resistance or anything like that. So I think it's the way you conceptually use it. It will not be perfect, but nothing is perfect, and we think it can add very useful data for the clinical management of patients. And we need to do larger studies, and the larger studies will address these issues. We were initially concerned that just providing the drugs themselves would impact, disrupting the host flora with rifampicin and things like that. That was one of the reasons for the animal models. That doesn't seem to be the case. But indeed, you can think of situations where things could go wrong. Yeah, of course. It's a good point.
A last question. As we are looking for somebody, I have one to Andrew and Anthony with regards to using of to Andrew with regards to the use of mobile phones and data transfer. Most ministries of health have traditionally been used to paper-based collection of data and storing and archiving. Have you experienced any challenges in getting the ministries of health to engage in this novel approach?
Yes, is the short answer. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it boils down to the individuals that you're dealing with, and you know, some people are very engaging and welcoming, and some people aren't. We typically work as the technology partner with a consortium, and so in many cases, a lot of the negotiations with the Ministry of Health in terms of how the data is going to be collected and presented is done through an implementation partner, a big NGO or research organisation. We work with people like PSI and RTI and London School and Liverpool School and so on. So a lot of those discussions take place at different levels. I mean, I would say that generally speaking, most ministries of health are coming round to accepting that they need to improve data collection and reporting, and certainly the donors. You know, at the end of the day, money is a powerful persuader, and a lot of the ministries of health rely on external international donors to provide the services, and the donors are demanding better information. They want accurate information in a timely way, standard reports, and they need to be able to audit the information, and the only way you can do that is to collect it and deliver it electronically. I mentioned one of the systems that we've integrated with DHIS2, District Health Information System 2, and that's been adopted by, I think, 30 different ministries of health in sub-Saharan Africa alone, and it's now being adopted by many of the international NGOs. So I think that level of investment shows that, like it or not, you know, they've got to start using system-based data for decision-making and reporting. And the only way to get data into the system from places like primary healthcare levels and community levels is making use of mobile technologies, and they're so widely, so commonly available now in those countries that it would be foolish to ignore them.
What about you, John?
I'd agree with everything Andrew's just said, and also add that was the reason that the consortium was set up, the GSMA consortium, to bring every component of a mobile solution together and be able to kind of break down barriers to handset ownership. And I think that's getting a lot of attention and positive feedback from the ministries.
Okay. I think in the interest of time and the session later this afternoon, I would like to request that you bear with me, that we stop the discussion there. It has been quite stimulating. I think we needed more time to engage all the panelists, but it's an opportunity for you to engage with them as we go out for lunch. So I request you to join me in giving them an applause.